Hey everyone, Francis here from What a Hell of a Way to Die. If you've been wondering how you can support myself and Nate here on the show, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/hellofaWayToDie. Joining the Patreon at any level gets you access to our Discord server, one bonus episode a month, and early access to interviews. At the $5 level, you'll get more bonus content and an opportunity to vote on monthly Zoo Crew episodes. And at the $10 and up level, you'll get exclusive stickers, patches, and pins sent out to you every quarter. Your support means that we can keep our regular episodes free and make sure we don't have to rely on advertisers. If you can, please consider joining and supporting your two favorite veteran dads.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It's Francis and Nate back in the dad saddles with you. Nate, it's been a while since we've talked about the weather. The pod chat currently is 32 degrees. So I am sitting here bundled up. I got my my army watch cap on. I've got two hoodies and some slippers, and my space heater is working overtime right now to get this place warmed up to a livable temperature. How are things on your side of the pond?
That's basically the temperature today, is like 0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit. But it's very, very clear because it's so cold. And so it's weird. Like, normally this time of year in the United Kingdom, this is potentially typical weather, but also more often than not, it's warmer, but it's rainy and cloudy just constantly, just endlessly unbroken clouds. So I'm kind of in a complicated moment here in the sense that, like, I don't like being cold, but frankly, I enjoy seeing the sunlight. I think it just kind of makes you feel better. I'm in our basement studio live room, so like the enclosure that's been soundproofed, which we have electric radiators. Like it's not a centralized system, but you can turn. It's not a space heater. It's like hooked up to the main circuit breaker, kind of that sort of power for a radiator. And so I've got it. It's not super warm in here because it wasn't on when I turned it on or when I came in, but it's getting there and it's nice. So I'm feeling okay. I got a little bike ride in too because I had to hustle to get to the train, and I was like, I'm not going to make it by walking, and I don't want to deal with trying to hire a stupid app bike. So I have a bike that I keep locked up in like a bike shed that I rent, and just it's not a good enough bike for me to commute regularly because in bad weather it's rickety, the tires too narrow. When it was my only bike, I was constantly fucking slipping on like wet manhole covers in the rain. So, but I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna get on that thing, and I made it to the train. I made it up the stairs at the platform just as the train that I need to be on was pulling in. So I made it in with maybe 15, 20 seconds to spare. But I did make it. So I can count that as a big W. And you know what? Fuck 6 a.m. PT, but sometimes doing a little brisk something outdoors in the cold, it kind of wakes you up. It invigorates you. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I mean, I every morning for the last 4 years that I've been living here, every morning at around 6 to 6:30, I have to walk my dog. So, and like 80% of the time, it's fine. I am at a point now where I wake up between 6 and 7 regardless. I no longer sleep past 7:30 unless I was for some reason up until 1 in the morning. But even then, I've got 100-pound Pyrenees demanding to go pee outside, lest she pee on the floors inside. So, and it is, yeah, it's not. You wake up and it's very brisk, and it's cold, and 10 minutes outside, and then I come back inside, and I don't need any more of that. Meanwhile, the dog is just like, no, fuck that. I want to be outside constantly at all times. She's already. Your parents had Pyrenees. Did you ever see them dig their snow holes?
No, I was never there when it was really snowy. I was there when it was really cold, but like how in Midwest cold where it's too cold to snow.
Yeah,
I remember one of those, but there wasn't enough snow on the ground for them to do that. I think my parents actually had to put. Normally they would sleep in a hutch, but I think they had to actually put them in the pole barn or something because it was actually too cold for them to sleep outside.
Yeah. I don't have any shelter for her outside, so I don't keep her outside because it's 32 in the pod shack. It's 0 outside. The space heater was running for a good 45 minutes before I started recording. So, but I just gave her some peanut butter and she'll be inside and happy with that and not bothering anybody. So,
yeah, it's funny. I had to go next door to handle because basically our neighbors are out of the country. The husband has a job he's on a contract. He's almost done, so they're going to be moving back next week. But for the time being, their house was on the market and they weren't staying there, and so they offer very, very, very graciously to let us stay in their place, and we just kind of keep it clean and handle all the showings, the viewings and stuff. Which, I mean, it's a bit of a challenge, but they do give enough advance notice because they know there's a baby, and so we just use that as we clean everything up, we make it look like the staging photos, we hide our stuff, we turn the lights on, and we go for walks. But because our place is right across the street, I understand our landlord was like, don't give the builders the keys. And I think the real reason is that like there's only one set of keys to that side door.
Sure.
And so if it gets lost, then like you're kind of fucked. Yeah. So it's a lot more expensive of a problem. So I just let them in, and then they leave the key in the door on the inside, and I come and lock it at night. But when I go over to the house, it's funny because I've left the temperature on what, as I get from British people, they recommend for like the temperature to leave your house in when you're away for holiday, but it's not like just frost protection levels. So it's set to 14, which is, I can't do the math in my head, but 14 Celsius is, I want to say, in like the 50s.
Yeah, it's not super warm.
It's not very warm. And so I kind of got the pod check feel yesterday because I needed to get work done, and sometimes it's harder to get a big editing session for a show like TF done on my laptop because the screen is small. And I have my setup back at our place, in one of the rooms on the ground floor that's not affected by the current sewer repair. So I went in there to edit, and I got about an hour, and I was like, I was wearing my coat the whole time, and I was like, my hands are fucking freezing. Yeah. I was like, also it smells like manure. It smells like when I was a kid in Germany and the farmers would put cow shit on the fields and stuff, what they call mist or whatever. And it still makes me laugh that Thames Water was like, they tried to argue they didn't have any obligation to pay us for our dislocation or relocation costs because we were voluntarily opting to relocate during this work.
And voluntarily opting to not have sewage in the basement
it's
where
like
my
a fucking
baby is.
mining shaft. It smells like shit everywhere on the ground floor. It's a fucking mining shaft, and we have no access to the kitchen because they protected the kitchen with they did a really good job of protecting everything, and they put up zip-up screens and stuff, but that's also where they stashed everything they took out of the bathroom. So the shower tray, the doors, the toilet, not the soil, not the gross shit. That's going in a dumpster outside, but basically, I couldn't get into the kitchen even if I wanted to because it's like a tightly packed storage unit in there right now.
Yeah,
and they're you're being indulgent asking for us to cover your relocation costs. And it's like, we have a 4-month-old baby. Are we supposed to just eat? Pass a box of Cheerios and then what are we supposed to? I struggle to even come up with the line of argument other than that. The people kind of doing the sort of British business condescension to you over the phone aren't the people actually working, because the workers, they're like, yeah, fuck, of course you don't want to fucking live in this. Jesus Christ, with a baby. It smells awful. And Day in and day out, they're either running pump trucks or hammering shit or jackhammering stuff or digging out soil that's infused with human shit. What are you going to do?
British landlords just on a
the landlord is fine. The landlord, that's the thing, right? Landlords are terrible in this country, and I can't believe I'm defending landlords, but our landlord used the sort of British libertarian, their equivalent of a sovereign citizen, the sort of freeman on the land shit, basically in our defense. She basically was like, either you guarantee in writing you'll do these things to take care of my tenants, or I sort of invoke my sacred right as a landlord and a British property owner, and I will fight you to the death, and you will never do this repair, and I don't care how long it takes. And so it's the rare instance of a landlord being like, I actually care about my tenants. But without getting too revealing of details, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that our landlord felt very affronted by how deceptive they were being and not telling her the full scope of the project, because they were like, oh, don't you worry your pretty little head about it. It's just us taking out the shower tray and doing a little repairs. And then we finally got the scope of work, and it's like we're digging a 2x2 meter shaft, knocking out all the interior walls, taking all the fixtures out. We're basically tunneling to hell in the back of your house.
Oh, so look, 2024 is the year of the tunnel. So
it's definitely the year of the tunnel in my house for some reason.
You're gonna get in Rambo 5. You're gonna get a smithy down there. You're gonna get a whole kind of tunneling.
I'm thinking more like 13th Warrior. We're just gonna have a whole like cave mound society down there doing like caveman shit, you know, like weird Russian pagan rituals or something like that.
Well, I think was it 2 years ago? You're also displaced out of your your living
it was 1 year ago. It was actually
ago.
less than a year ago. It was right around this time. That wasn't to do with the sewer infrastructure. That was in the appraisal process for a remortgage. The inspectors, or what they call a surveyor, who came through and took a look at the place, identified a few problems, and while they were doing what they thought would be relatively cosmetic repairs, I mean, more serious stuff on the outside of the house, but less so on the inside, they were removing stuff on the inside to make these fixes and realized the problem was much more extensive than they thought. So what was supposed to be 3 or 4 days away, well, you know, we couldn't be there for work from home. It was too loud, too dusty. Cynthia was pregnant. Turned into, I think, 10 or 11 days out of the house, because what they realized was that when someone had remodeled the place and had cut away it's so stupid. Right. On the ground floor, there's a front room, and there was what in the original design of these Victorian-era houses would have been a dining room. Because back in those days, I don't know if they had running water in the kitchen, but the kitchen would have been what they call a scullery. It would have literally just been like a scrub pots place. So the dining room was separate from the kitchen area. Now, they decided to extend one of the rooms, the front room, and make it into like a bigger like living room, and shrink the smaller room, and it became kind of a guest room, but it's kind of too small to be a functional room. And the living room is just awkward now because of the way they expanded one wall a little bit. In doing that, they removed a 120-odd-year-old structural interior wall. They braced it, but they didn't do it correctly. So this was causing it to settle and the upstairs wall to settle to the point where there were cracks forming in the wall in the upstairs rooms that you could see through.
Was it plaster?
It's brick. Everything is brick.
Oh, so you can see through the brick. Jesus.
It was cracking so bad you could basically see daylight through because it had settled that bad. And so they had to go in, cut away a bunch in the ceiling, replace the pinning. There was a beam in place, so thankfully they didn't just leave it unsupported. But they had to fix that to make it actually do the job it was supposed to, and then go in, repair the brick with mortar and cement, let it dry, then replaster, then repaint. So thankfully in the process, they're also like, okay, any other things we need to fix? And they fixed the problems with the radiator. So for the first time in 5 years, our house actually warms up in the winter. Because like the radiators upstairs basically didn't work. Like it was awful. And they even said like, God, it's fucking freezing up here even with the heat on. So thankfully there was like a reality check for the landlord. Like, no, even the builders who are actually good, who you trust, they also say it's balls cold up here. So yes, second time in 2 years. I guess every late January, early February, it's just Nate, Cynthia, and now baby get displaced month until we leave Britain.
Yeah, this time last year I was replacing a kitchen.
I remember. I was thinking about you recently about the whole like someone did their like Etsy pottery business or something and dumped cement down the pipes or whatever, and then they had to cut away everything.
It wasn't that bad. It was so I make soap just because it's cheap and it's fun and I can do it. So I was making soap and I dropped something down into the garbage disposal. And it was something where like I couldn't just pull it out. I had to like take the garbage disposal off of the bottom of the sink and get into it, which like fine, I've done it before. So I took that off, and the pipe that the garbage disposal connected to that went into the wall for all of the water to drain, that pipe just completely disintegrated. Like it was the original lead pipe in the house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that completely went away, and the kitchen at that point, like. The plumber that we brought in was just like, we have to take everything, we have to get into the wall. Like, we have to bust into the wall to get this, and it was behind cabinetry. And this was a house that was a rental property for 20 years. So, it's not exactly the most high-dollar stuff in there. It's not necessarily taken very well care of in there. It's
the Lowe's special on everything.
Exactly. And it was all already like 20 years old. So when my wife was like, look, we moved this, and everything's going to disintegrate. So... we might as well
immediately post 9/11 Lowe's special on everything.
Exactly. So we went with an IKEA kitchen, and it took 3 months of planning and prepping and building and hiring a guy to come out to run the plumbing, and then hiring a guy to run electricity. Like the entire The entire thing cost like at the end of the day cost like $11,000 or something.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was, and it's a small. I have a small house. I have a very small kitchen. Like my kitchen is so small that the refrigerator and freezer are downstairs. Like I don't. We have a standalone fridge and freezer. And then upstairs we got a small, like it's bigger than a mini fridge. It's got a fridge and a freezer area, but it's also
I know what you mean, because
yeah,
most
it hits
apartments,
me about chest high.
most apartments in New York City that aren't like in the sort of landlord special gentrified kind of thing, that's more standard to have a size of fridge freezer combo that just isn't. I mean, like I've lived in some broke ass places in America in not great apartments, but unless we just didn't have a fridge and we had to supply our own mini fridge, the apartment always had a full size fridge and freezer. It was just like a Frigidaire from 1980 or something.
Yeah.
But in New York, you'll see that a lot. Like they're not mini, but they're small, and that's pretty standard here. Although to be honest with you, we've lived in places in this country and stayed in places where you get basically a mini fridge size fridge and a mini fridge size freezer, and that's it. Like obviously European stuff, less. It's not even.
It's not made for American burgers. I get it.
Well, what's funny though is that you can get, and they are actually popular, American-sized appliances here. It's just that most houses just don't have the space for them. We got a Bosch fridge. We just opted because our fridge kept. Something was wrong with it, and it kept draining. Like liquid kept condensing or pooling inside it. It was like spoiling food, and so we just opted to buy a new one. And I spoke to the landlord about it, and I guess what I didn't realize was we should have just not said anything. But in Britain, apparently, there's a thing where, like, if the tenant buys something, the landlord has to. Basically, the tenant can ask to have it repaid, and so landlords basically don't want tenants to buy new things, and if they do, they want to have the sort of right to pick what it is and pay for it because they don't want to. They think in sort of landlord 101 they're going to get hit with a bill by the time. We bought a dryer because they, contrary to Matt Iglesias's bullshit, you can get condenser dryers in this country and in Europe that are fine. I mean, it's a Turkish brand that we bought, it's Beko, and it's fine. It works. I'm not going to say it works as fast as an American dryer, but like it's the same. Like it's genuinely just, except instead of needing an exhaust vent, it has a thing that condenses liquid and you have to dump the liquid tank like a dehumidifier, but it's like much smaller than the outlet is much smaller, so you don't have to worry about spilling like with a dehumidifier tank. And the lint filter is just a different kind, like a lint basket that you pull out and unhook or unsnap basically to take the lint out. But other than that, it's functionally the same. And in a way, I'd say it's better because even though it takes longer than an American one, it doesn't need the ducting. It doesn't need the venting.
Sure.
So we bought that, and like I would never in a million years be like, oh yeah, landlord, fucking pay us for it. Like I don't care. But also that's me being American, I guess, because God knows, tell a landlord, hey, I bought a new fridge, pay me for it in America. It's just like,
yeah,
that's how you get like 5 dudes who look like Hell's Angels and Yosemite Sam combined showing up at your house to evict you.
Well, yeah, I spent 3 months doing dishes in the bathtub.
Wow.
It was absolute hell. But we got it together. I have a great kitchen now. Like I have a great entertaining kitchen. The one trade-off that we had was I wanted a dishwasher because I didn't have one, and I'm the one who does the dishes, and fuck all that noise. But getting a dishwasher, we no longer have like a range that has an oven and a stovetop. So we have a stovetop, like a glass top stove, 4 burners, and you can buy like a. It's not a air fryer. It's kind of like an all-in-one. And it's big enough. It's big enough that I can put a Pyrex into. Like I made shepherd's pie the other day, and I could put my 7x13 Pyrex in there. I can cook a frozen pizza in there, and I've learned how to bake bread in it. So like it's fine. I don't have the big oven anymore, but I've learned how to use the smaller kind of form factor oven to do everything. But it does. Like I say, it's not an air fryer, but it has that capability. I can even proof stuff in there. Like when I'm making bread, I can proof all my dough in there. So. It's pretty great. I love it. It costs like $200 and it just sits on top of the counter. So I have I often regret some of the dumb things that I spend money on, but like putting the money into a really nice kitchen is not one of them because I finally if you could ever like build a kitchen around you, like here's what I want inside of a kitchen, and here's where I want things, because I do the majority of the cooking. So my wife did most of the design, but with me involved and figuring out how we want everything to sit and how we want, like we have like a bar stool kind of area, and we used to have like an island, like a floating island, but now it's a big U shape that we have. So you walk into one area, and then like when you're in there, you have control over, everything, except. And thankfully, the basement stairs are right next to it, so you can just run downstairs and grab whatever you need out of the fridge or freezer. And it was irritating in the beginning, but once we got all of that sorted out, it's a nice setup. So I at least so far January. Last year I didn't have a kitchen, and also I spent 3.5 weeks fucked up from the flu. So I have both of those not happening this year, so I'm very excited. Although I am getting on an airplane tomorrow, so RIP, I'm probably going to get COVID for the second time doing that. But we'll see. I'm gonna wear a mask. I think I'm gonna be that guy.
It's kind of hard to get COVID boosters without basically if you're under 65. But I think I may have a valid reason in the sense that
you got a baby.
Yeah, I have a baby, but I don't think they would consider that valid. But I can also just be like, oh, I'm going to see my parents, and my dad is disabled and 70 years old, and has diminished immune function, and that maybe I can get one. But they're not really doing boosters here after the way they did it, the 2 shots and then the booster, to the point where as I understand it in the news, they're actually throwing away a lot of vaccine doses here, but they basically won't let you get them if you're it's very, very challenging to get them if you're under 65. And I think there's a variety of reasons for that in terms of dumb bullshit the UK government does, but it is kind of surprising to me that they have the stuff, they procured it already, and they're just wasting it. But I think if I had to hazard a guess, it's that they basically, they don't want people doing COVID testing, they don't want people having positive results because they don't want to report they have it, and they don't want people being able to claim they need to isolate or take off work. And so it's a kind of underhanded way to make it as difficult as possible to get tested for it, but then also if they don't acknowledge that boosters are a good idea, then basically if they make it really hard for people to get them, then it's sort of okay, well then we can just pretend it doesn't exist. And it's look, maybe we're at the point where it's evolved to the point where it's just a bad flu. Great, you know what? The flu still kills a lot of fucking people.
Yeah,
and
it's
flu shots aren't mandatory here, and in fact, flu shots typically aren't free either. We have public health care, but unless you're deemed sort of in need of a flu shot, they don't tell you to get one. And if you do want one, you kind of have to jump through hoops and typically pay out of pocket for it. Whereas
Really?
It's in America, it's the one thing that's basically free.
Well,
or cheap.
If you have at least any insurance, you can get a flu shot.
Every job I've ever had, every civilian job I've ever had in America, they offered free flu shots. Someone come in and give it to you, yeah.
Yeah, because American, your boss doesn't want you fucked up for 3 weeks on the flu and not able to work. So,
also, I'll be honest with you, I've realized this from talking to Brits that people think they encounter Americans online and some of our opinions, and what they don't realize is that there's stuff in America that just isn't the case here. For example, I can recall, maybe it's different, but when I was a little kid, I attended public school in California, as a very small child, like preschool age. But I had to get vaccinated and show a vaccine card stamped by doctors and shit with the dates and stuff to be allowed to attend a state school. And that's not a thing here. There's not mandatory vaccinations here. They're recommended, but they're not mandatory. They're not even mandatory for medical staff. And that's not unusual in Europe either. I think it's just a different cultural thing, but I think there is sort of a culture of encouraging it. And I don't know, that stuff, it would be hard for them to institute mandatory stuff. And it's also, I don't necessarily know. I certainly do not think that the lack of mandatory vaccines reduces the degree to which there's the kind of woo health fucking healing crystal fascist anti-vax people, because those people are definitely all over in Europe. And I don't think the lack of mandatory vaccine things the way that we have in America necessarily makes those people less popular, because they just go on Facebook and say insane shit. But yeah, dude.
Right, but how do you argue that? It's just don't get a vaccine. It's okay, I don't have to. Nobody has to.
Yeah, but they also try to make it so they try to encourage people to not vaccinate their kids for lots of stuff. Whereas and you know what? I'll be honest with you. It doesn't reduce my desire to make sure that our daughter's vaccination schedule is followed. But I'll be real. they really undersold how strong of an impact the meningitis vaccine would have on her. And we actually wound up having to call the advice line for the NHS. And the doctor who called us back on the line was like, I do not understand why GP surgery nurses don't say this, but like, you need to give her baby Tylenol, like the liquid baby Tylenol, every 6 hours religiously. Like they say, give one dose right on the spot, and then 6 hours later, and then just wait and see. And it's like, he said, I've never seen a situation where people who wait and see didn't suddenly have a really feverish baby. Like, you need to give it to them every 6 hours. Like, that first 24 hours is really critical. Your immune system makes you feel a little unwell when you get a vaccine. Imagine when it's the first time you've ever had a vaccine and you're 2 months old.
Yeah.
You know? And so, like, seeing how unwell she got, I understand why people get weird about it. Like, it doesn't change our opinions, but, like, the combination of seeing the baby unwell and also everything that the medical professionals tell you turns out to not be true. If you were conspiratorially minded, you could see how that would just be a fucking playground for going hog wild with it.
Yeah, it's not great. Like, thankfully, my wife is the one who did all of the medical appointments for Lily, and still does. And I'm happy that she did that, but it was definitely, I could tell that it was kind of traumatizing for my wife as well as the kid. Like, the kid will get over it because she's not going to remember, but you being the one who has to watch a strange man stick needles into your kid, and then your kid feels shitty for the next 48 hours. And, in your mind, you're like, yes, no, this is better than mumps. This is better than rubella. This is better than chickenpox. But it's still not great to watch. So I'm with you where, like, I understand where somebody might say, I want to have a different vaccination schedule. Maybe I want to spread things out a little bit more. I understand. But
there's, like, as I understand it, also, there's, like, some medical opinions about that, but overall the consensus is pretty in favor of the way that we're going about it. And, like,
yeah,
I find that kind of stuff tends to be, I don't know, I'm very uncomfortable with the idea that you get one person or 3 out of however many thousands of pediatricians say, okay, try this thing, and all the literature, all the studies say there's no appreciable benefit, but there's a lot more risk. And people are like, yeah, but these 3 doctors said this. Is like, yeah, well, I mean, have you never met a fucking insane doctor? Have you never met a fucking bad doctor? I mean, like, they exist. Just because they went to medical school doesn't mean they don't suck at their jobs. Like, I had a doctor set my fucking hand on fire when I was 7 because they were trying to burn off a wart. He didn't realize that the previous nurse had put liquid nitrogen on my hand to try to freeze it, and it hadn't let it fucking fully evaporate, so it fucking went up in flames. Ugh. I'm dead serious. I mean, it was a flash, but imagine being 7 and the doctor's using like a little heat thing, like a heat pen, and he lights your hand on fire.
So you've been just like traumatized by every medical professional
I'm
that
not
you've
even
had to
scared
deal
by
with.
medicine. I'm not scared by doctors. I genuinely like medical, like, I like doctors. I do. I always impressed by the sort of like the subject matter expertise and the fact that like a lot of getting to where they are is just, it's like, take the most advanced thing that I know about what I do for a living, and then that's just like one module of like 24 modules they've had to get to that, and they're constantly like learning and certifying. Like, in general, like, it's really impressive. Now, granted, doctors can be fucking dickheads to people, and I've had doctors who just have, it's like, why do you walk into the room talking to me like I'm an idiot? But by and large, like, I'm not freaked out or traumatized by medical stuff, but I have experienced bad medical care. You know what I mean? Also in the Army, when like, oh, don't worry, this medic's going to help you, is like, oh, he's really good at giving IVs, or he's really good at giving shots, and then like, a week later, you look like somebody's hit you with a baseball bat in like the inside of your elbows, like, because actually he was terrible at giving IVs, and you've hemorrhaged.
Yeah, that's why they don't do needle drops anymore in the combat medic, because we spent too much time blowing each other's veins out. Yeah, when last time we had to do that, I did not put my finger on the catheter properly, so the guy just started bleeding all over the place. And when it came to my turn, he just went completely through the vein, like in one side and out the other. Yeah,
I don't even have a problem with shots, like in principle, but like needle malpractice, needle mishaps, needle bloopers, just ugh.
Right, like, it's not really a thing that, like, when I look back upon it, and I look back on those first, because I've done combat medic training since then, and they got rid of that, because the only thing that you would be doing needle drops for was somebody's dehydrated, and they're like, look, that's not enough reason, anymore for you to fuck up your buddy's arm like that. But like, we're just in a room somewhere. Like here's the shitty a room in our shitty building. We're gonna put down some like medical, like, the little blue and white pads they put down that soaks up blood when you fuck up and everything. And we're just like, all right, everybody, just here's some hand sanitizer. We're going to learn how to do needle drops. Like, this doesn't seem correct. This doesn't seem like the proper place to teach me. One, at least 3 people in this room are hung the fuck over. So I don't think this is a good idea for anybody. Thankfully, I picked a buddy who was visibly sober and also not really wanting to do this, but we got through it together by fucking each other's arms up and being like, well, I'm never doing this again. And thankfully, the Army never made us do it again.
Yeah, I don't miss that stuff at all. I mean, I somehow something came up, and it was not me intervening to get out of it, where a thing, like, I can't remember what it was, where I had to go to some other thing to handle, like, a property thing for my company. And I was apparently going to be one of the like test subjects or like the person demonstrator to get a nasopharyngeal airway. Which is when they stick a tube through your nose, and
you're supposed to be unconscious for that.
Well, enough fucking KY jelly, and you don't have to be unconscious apparently, because that's the way that our like battalion medic or medic platoon went about training. I don't know. I just know that NPA not really a thing you want to have while you're awake, and hoo boy. But yeah, like, you were talking about flu shots, and you were talking about dealing with like the fucked up kitchen stuff, and bringing it back to that. I've never owned a home, and I don't know if I'm ever going to, in the sense that where we're moving, housing is incredibly expensive, particularly to buy, but there's also really good renter protections. So you've got a pretty high rate of people that just rent their entire lives. And the amount of money that we would need to buy a place in Geneva, if we wanted to, is just so astronomical that I think that even if we were able to save that much money up, I would be a little weirded out, because you've then basically sunk so much in the way of savings into that deposit, or not deposit, the down payment. And I don't know, like, if something goes wrong, are you going to lose? Like, if you've got a problem with your budgets and you're renting in a place where, like, you're not dealing with, like, Britain, where the entire economic system is built on landlord bullshit. If you have a problem, like, you can perhaps downsize. Whereas, like, if you're locked into a mortgage, that's my fear. But I mean, I'd still buy if I could afford it. It's just that to get the kind of thing that we're like, to get an apartment in Geneva that's, let's say, aiming for 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, or 1.5 bathrooms, hopefully with a balcony, because it's pretty standard. Like, almost everything in that country, like they tend to emphasize having at least some kind of outdoor space, even in your apartment. It would be a struggle to find something for under $2 million that has that space. I mean, it's doable, but like, to put it into perspective, yeah, man. I mean, Geneva, Switzerland's an incredibly expensive country for housing, and Geneva is the most expensive city for housing. Like, Zurich is cheaper than Geneva. So, and Zurich is like Switzerland's biggest city and financial capital. So you can do the math in your head there. Me and Cynthia, what we said we would probably do is, if we wound up staying there permanently, is we would rent until we got to like retirement age. And by that point, we would notionally have become citizens, and we wouldn't only be allowed to live in the canton of Geneva. And at that point, we could maybe find some place cheaper. And depending on our daughter, if she wants to stay or if she wants to be close, because we'd like that. We'd like to be close, to stay close forever. Then perhaps, like, depending on where she's living, working, etc., try to be in a reasonable distance. I mean, of course, I have the dream of, wouldn't it be sick to like move to the Italian part of Switzerland, which is beautiful and beautiful weather and one of the cheapest places for housing, because, like, sadly, there's just not as much like employment. Like, a lot of people who are from there have to leave to find work. But if it's far and it requires a 3-hour plus train for our daughter to visit us, then we'd probably just aim for something closer. But at that point, we might have saved up enough that we could afford a place that's not $2 million fucking dollars. You know what I mean? Because like, you can get a place.
Patreon.com/hell of a way to die.
I mean,
get Nate set up in Geneva.
Understand that, like, renting is not, it's not cheap, but the way things are going in London, and how expensive mortgages are with the current interest rates in this country, if we were looking for the place that we're renting now, on the current market, we could expect to spend Being conservative, 50 to 60% more for just the same thing we've got already. We just happen to be locked into a thing because we signed a long agreement. So in the past, I was like, oh, fuck, man, like moving to Geneva is going to be like a lot more expensive for housing. But honestly, compared to if we like, given the situation we're moving and we're looking for a new lease, if we were in that same position in London, it would cost more than Geneva. And in fact, in total, it would cost more overall because you have council tax, you have pretty expensive utilities and stuff like that. Gas and electric is just insanely expensive here right now. So it's actually going to be cheaper in terms of housing there.
Yeah, it's going to... price will go down when you're not Brexited.
Well, how to explain it?
I missed this. I missed our discussions of how fucked up England is. Go ahead.
I mean, at the end of it, this is just a country by and for landlords, and the only real vehicle of wealth generation in this country at this point is people treating housing as an investment. And so Britain has the strange combination of some of the most, if not the most expensive housing in Europe, and also the worst quality, at least in Western Europe. Certainly like oldest housing stock, least energy efficient housing stock. And there was an article recently in the Financial Times that said that the last time the barrier to buying a home was this high in terms of like average house cost versus median income was like the 1870s.
Oh, Jesus.
Because the median income in this country is so low and hasn't gone up because basically since the financial crisis, they've just been locked into permanent austerity. And I've said it many times in the show that when Britain was still in the EU, the only country that had a worse income growth rate post-2009 than the United Kingdom was Greece. And now housing is incredibly expensive. So, you know, the median income in this country, like, it's always debatable, but I think they say it's around £37,000 a year. Now that's probably median family income, and that's pretty high, quite frankly. Like, there are many places in this country where the median income is likely half of that if you're lucky. I mean, certainly individual income is incredibly low, especially in the further out parts of the country. But yeah, the median income in this country is about, like, let's say a little bit under £40,000, and the median house price is about £325,000. So you have to make 8 times the median salary to be able, or rather, it's not you have to, but put it this way, it's just in order to afford the average priced home, you have to make a lot more money than the median salary. And the last time the ratio was this bad was in the Victorian era. However, what that doesn't include is that's the median house price for all of the United Kingdom. In London, it's far, far worse. In London, I mean, I haven't been looking for a while, so I couldn't say for certain, but I do know that like houses on our street that were selling for £600,000, which is a lot of money, which is almost probably 10 times what they were selling for in the 90s. Houses that were selling for £500,000 or £600,000 are now selling for £900,000. And these are maybe, if you're lucky, 1,100 square feet, probably less. Hopefully more than one bathroom, but likely not. Old Victorian houses.
That is what I have. Though I do have I have a Pittsburgh toilet in the basement, which is when you have a toilet that is not surrounded by any walls. Just kind of a free-floating basement toilet.
Why do you call it a Pittsburgh toilet? It's just
that's
Pittsburgh.
The name.
People just shit in the open.
It is. Look it up. It's on Wikipedia. It's considered a Pittsburgh toilet. It's just a bathroom. Not even a bathroom. It is I have a toilet. I have a working toilet downstairs under the stairs. There's no walls around it. For some reason, it's called a Pittsburgh toilet. I don't think it counts as a half bath because it is literally just a toilet, but it's working. It's a workable one. So when my daughter is taking one of her hour-long baths, I have a place to go. But that's, what you're describing is what I have. But then again, also I'm in St. Louis, so location is a lot of it.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, but don't get me wrong, Greater London is big, and I think the thing that's the challenge is that London is the place where you are likely to find a job that can pay you more than the very, very low salaries and wages elsewhere in this country. But you get caught in this kind of downward spiral because to get out far enough from where you work to be, like from central London, to be able to afford places that are not at that level of like your garden variety row houses, terraced houses, £800,000 puts you so far out that you have to commute by British Rail, which is very unreliable and also incredibly expensive. Like, we're talking thousands of pounds a year for a rail pass. Like, it's very expensive to take the trains in this country. Like, one of the reasons why so many people travel abroad to go to places like Spain for their vacations here is that flying your entire family to Spain and staying in a hotel or a resort in Spain and coming back, you'll probably wind up spending maybe a third of what you would spend if you did it in the United Kingdom, because everything is expensive here. So in the United States, I was thinking about this, like, I know people who have like corporate jobs that are, I mean, in that sort of white collar upper echelon who live in greater St. Louis. It's not that those don't exist in regional cities in the United Kingdom, but there's just fewer of them. And it's kind of conventional wisdom that if you want to further your career, you have to come to London. But I mean, I would say in terms of like average earnings and stuff, people are way worse off here. It's wild. I mean, a lot of Brits don't realize how expensive and volatile America is, in the sense that, like, you pay more in taxes, there's lots of hidden costs, you have to pay for health insurance, you can lose your job for any reason at any moment, and, you know, they fully just tripled prices for some reason. But a lot of people are like, oh, it'd be so nice to move to America and make a lot of money. And I kind of understand that, because, like, a job that would get you paid $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 in the United States, if you're lucky, will pay you £40,000 here, which is about $50,000. But as I've said so many times before, imagine you have a qualified job and you can maybe hope to earn £35,000 a year, you know, at like the mid-career level. So about $45,000 a year in a city where stuff's as expensive as New York for housing and cost of living and stuff. Like, it's genuinely really, really bad here. And there, I don't know, that's everything about it is sort of centered on this idea of like, oh, well, you just got to get on the property ladder. And it's like, have you heard of these things? Shared mortgages in America? Have you heard of this stuff? Like, does that exist?
What is that?
Shared mortgage is basically where you go in to buy a place and you pick up half the mortgage and an investor picks up the other half. And so you both pay your mortgage and you also pay them a payment, so that they basically just make money off it, but don't deal with any of the housing at all. And so
no, thank you.
That's a way that, like,
so you can own a house, but it can still get taken by the bank.
Yes, if that person becomes derelict in their share. I mean,
I guess that happens here. If I wasn't paying my mortgage, the bank would come and take it as well. But
I mean, but oftentimes the way that it works is that, look, I haven't really looked into the details, so I don't want to get too wrong about this. But like, there's percentages, and then also sometimes it can be that the investor part of it is helping out with the down payment, because that can be a huge problem here. Because, like, something that you'll notice in this country is that banks don't want to lend, even if you make a lot of money. Like, they typically won't lend more than 5 times your annual income, but they also have upper limits on how much they're willing to lend to first-time mortgage borrowers. So if you were trying to buy a place in London, even if you and your partner had good jobs, like say you were earning enough that you could notionally put your standard 10, because they do typically 10% deposits here, 10% deposit, and you could comfortably cover the mortgage. Well, if it's above, I believe it's £550,000 is the lending limit. As I understand, and it may have changed because I'm not interested. I will not be buying a place in this country. But as I understand it, it doesn't really matter. Like, they're not going to lend you that much money, so you're kind of fucked unless you have cash. And it's like, people are showing up, and it's like, oh, yep, my mom and dad just lent me £300,000 in cash, £250,000 in cash. And I was like, if I needed $1,000 in an emergency, my parents could probably spot me. But like, they don't have £250,000 just sitting around. And if they did, they'd need it for my dad's long-term care. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't have that kind of money. And so it's like that's what you're competing against, is people who can borrow, the equivalent of almost $400,000 from the bank of mom and dad.
Yeah, my parents have said, like, oh yeah, when we die, we've got a life insurance payout, we've got this, that, and the other thing, but like, they have to die, and I don't want my parents to die. I love my parents, but also the Hortons are a very long-lived group of people. My father is probably going to be, my father is 82 now, 81, and he's probably going to live at least another 15 years. So I guess I will have to continue to slog away at the content mines until that. Actually, I'm going to try to get him onto the podcast. I can make him start working for me.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I mean, I talked about it, but unfortunately, I don't think my dad is in the position really to be on a podcast and kind of like, what's the right word here? Like telling stories and doing the sort of banter stuff. Because I did want to potentially talk to him about his experience in what's it called, Operation Paul Bunyan, because he was there. And Joe did the episode about it, but unfortunately, my dad, like I said, is just. It feels as though his condition has stabilized, which is wonderful with medication and with therapy and stuff like that. But like he's got Parkinson's and he can't really. He just. I feel as though he would feel embarrassed at the kind of like reduced capacity, and I wouldn't want to put something out there, or even for my own, like for our daughter to hear it. Like I wouldn't want him to feel as though he was like ashamed of how he sounded, and it's just not really a discussion that once I kind of realized that I didn't want to pursue it.
Yeah, I can understand that. My father actually gets to go in and get like he does medical, like he's got nothing better to do during the day, so he does a lot of like, I don't want to say medical experiments, but when they're like, we need somebody to come in and do X, Y, and Z, and we'll pay you $120 for it. So he does that from time to time for a little extra money. And one of the ones he does is he goes in and gets brain scanned because he's a man in his 80s who has no signs of like any dementia or anything like that. He's still my father has very much ADHD, but that's he's still all there. So he goes in. It's like, yeah, I get to go in and get my brain scanned because my brain's still good. So I need to come up with the time to go out there because he was telling me. I went to lunch with him yesterday and he was telling me all kinds of stories about getting shit faced after playing volleyball with a bunch of guys and how he's like. He went to go play volleyball after work, and he played volleyball with a whole bunch of Hispanic guys, and he was the only white guy, and they would never let him buy beer. They're like, no, you think your money's no good with us? We're gonna buy your drinks all night, and then you end up crawling home at the end of the day. So yeah, my dad's got a lot of stories. I'm gonna get him to tell stories about his dad though, because his dad got like blown up a couple times. A man who was born in 1900 in America in like fucking rural Missouri and rural Kansas, he's got a lot of stories there.
He basically lived in like the background, sort of establishing shots of the movie Lincoln.
Yeah,
like it's not that far removed.
Yeah, while like the actual story is happening up front, there's just like a random explosion from a mine in the back.
Yeah, there's
like,
just
killed like 5 guys, whatever.
Some folks in like old timey pioneer garb cutting a tree down with an axe, and it's like, yep,
right.
that's your granddad.
Yeah, my grandfather.
My great grandfathers on my dad's side and my mom's side were probably born around that time. I want to say my great grandfather was born in like 1901 or 1902. My English great grandfather actually not far at all from where Hussein used to live in Southeast London, like far out Southeast London. That would have been a whole separate kind of town back then, but the city expanded. And then on my dad's side, I don't really know that much about it, but I just know that he was born in the Mississippi Delta because my dad's whole family is from there, from Sunflower County, Mississippi. So I know that my granddad was like the youngest of 12. And I realized talking to my grandmother about it that what they experienced as children in the Mississippi Delta in the Great Depression is not necessarily all that far off from the Coen brothers film Oh Brother Where Art Thou in terms of like the setting and what stuff looked like. And my grandmother even said that she just enjoyed that movie because it was sort of, you very rarely see things that want to treat a specific era and place that really well, like in film. And obviously the Coen brothers like love to go all out with whatever they're doing, creating a setting. And yeah, that's basically what I don't necessarily know if they ate, if they ever had a meal and the guy said, I slaughtered that horse last Tuesday. I think she's starting to turn. You know what I mean? But but that's the world they grew up in. And I know my great grandfather was an engineer in the Army, but I don't really know much more about him because I didn't hear these stories growing up. And I saw my grandparents I saw my entire family very rarely because everyone was in the Army. So everyone was somewhere else in the world. And then now they're all old or have passed on. So such is life, I guess.
Yeah, I'm very happy that my military career was for the like I got out in 2020. My daughter was born in 2015, so she has kind of a passing like, oh, I know Dad was in the Army, but I'm not. Like when my wife was pregnant, that kind of became the first like, yep, I need to get out of the Army. I'm not disappearing for a year at a time away from my kids. So for exact reasons like that, I never loved the Army enough to let it fuck up the rest of my relationships. So hopefully my daughter will, on the other end of it, when she hits 18, will not be like, I want to continue the family name. Like, go dance on TikTok or something. It's way more.
Yeah, I it's different because obviously our goal is that we're planning on settling in Switzerland if we're able to make that work. And I mean, I don't know, like, there's both the question of whether we'd want to and whether it's possible if we were going to have another kid someday. I don't know. If we had a son, like, and we stayed there, he would have to do military service or like the equivalent to it, like a civil service kind of thing. But it's not like hardcore face smash indoctrination as far as I know. It's certainly not like if you have to do military service in Greece or South Korea or something. But it's still, you get drafted.
Yeah,
and
you gotta go do some army shit. Yeah.
And I don't know really how I would feel about it. Other than I think it's one
it's
of those
not like
things.
the Swiss go to war with anybody. Like,
no, they do peacekeeping stuff, but they don't bring their draft soldiers for that. That's only their like professional military, which is even smaller than their draft military. I just heard a lot of people say it's just a big fucking waste of time, and so like you just kind of, I'm like, yeah, welcome to being in the military, having your goddamn time wasted. So the fact that we've got a daughter and she won't be drafted like that. I mean, I don't really know how I'd feel, but like I think it'd be weird. I hope she doesn't want to become, a cop or active duty military. But like, if she wanted to join the Swiss Army as a volunteer, like I'd be like, are you sure? I wouldn't want to do the thing where you become so hell bent on discouraging them that you subtly encourage them. But if she wanted to become a cop, I'd be like, well, how did I fail? How did I fail as a parent?
I know I have that problem. My daughter is very black and white with right and wrong, and like with no encouragement from us, she's just like, yeah, cops stop bad people from doing bad things. And it's like, I don't know how to like, and right, because she's 8, we kind of have to massage that a little bit because I don't want to just be like, no, every cop is not.
But also, like, if you try to drill that stuff into her, then like if she starts saying that around other kids and their parents and stuff like that, then like all of a sudden then you have a really awkward conversation.
Right. And I try to be as honest and open with my daughter about things because, that's not necessarily how it was done with me, but also I don't think my parents, when I was in the 90s were just like, no, fuck cops. They're all pieces of shit. They didn't have the internet like we do now where we get to watch all the cops be pieces of shit.
I'll just show our daughter that the masshole Billy video of the guy who's just like the world's biggest, like, yeah, go Pats Boston guy, but he hates cops. And he's just always doing TikToks talking shit about cops. And she'd be like, yeah. He's like, yeah, you didn't want to be you didn't even want to be a cop. You had to be a cop. Because you sucked at hockey, no girls wanted to date you. Ha! You're a fucking cop. You're a loser. And you're a criminal. Because cops are criminals. It's just like, yep, you tell him, Dunkin' Donuts guy.
Yeah, my hope and dream is that she has a good role model in my older brother who is a park ranger cop. So he's a federal LEO, but he is the guy in charge of the Arch now. So, he's the head ranger at the Arch. So he's moved up in the world, but at least like when I talk to him about other cops, he's like, no, all the city cops are fucking morons. They're all...
I believe it was you who shared this thing that Cynthia saw, but maybe it was someone else, where the whole story happened with the cops crashing their SUV into the gay bar in St. Louis and then saying that it was like, oh, we swerved to hit a dog and we were attacked, and it turns out like everything they said is a lie.
Yes.
But she found someone shared an article of like, the top 10 ridiculous St. Louis police moments. And it's like, God damn, like, I guess I got spoiled with all the problems with the NYPD. I didn't realize how fucking worse it is.
At least, like, the NYPD will fuck you up for no reason. And I if you jump a turnstile or whatever, I know that they always got like 5 cops guarding turnstiles and everything. But like St. Louis cops are a breed of stupid. Like, I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a cop that shot another cop at a house party. One of them was on duty. They just like swung by the house party because other cops were there having a house party, and then decided to play like some weird fucked up version of Russian roulette where they were just pointing a gun and shooting, pulling the trigger at each other. One cop died, obviously, but there's also this whole like love triangle thing that was going because it was a female cop that died, but the cop that shot her, shot and killed her, left, and then went outside and started bashing his head against like the windshield of his own car because he just realized how much he fucked up. That's our police force. That's the people who protect and serve here. So when I say I don't call the cops, we truly do not call the cops, because unless like there's a medical emergency, because holy shit, I have seen it get so worse around here.
That's something that I've seen too that's different in this country, is that like you can call, like, obviously with the whole system being under such incredible pressure, like there's no guarantee they'll respond, but you can call an ambulance and that doesn't automatically call the cops. So ambulances are like, there's no charge for being transported in one, and the cops don't show up when there's like an equivalent to a 911 call. And so, because here in this country, like that's one thing where I had to kind of get over, because I remember there were some situations where I realized now people were having what seemed like mild but still significant medical issues, where like they weren't going to die but they didn't look well, and I was just like, but it didn't call the ambulance, because like in New York that brings A, the cops, and B, the thing that's going to charge you $50,000 or whatever. And it's like, also, and when it's like a homeless person who seems unwell, I don't know if that's the right answer. I didn't know at the time if that's the right answer, because that could be a death sentence for them in New York if you call the cops. You know what I mean? And so it's like one of those things where, oh yeah, it's just different. And I don't know, just off topic, but just talking about that. I remember seeing that CCTV footage of the cops just straight driving their shit right into that building, into the bar.
It was so like, it's so crazy, like that they just outwardly lied. And it's like, there's so many like closed circuit cameras that show them blowing a red light. And then there was the swerve. There's no dog
swerving to not hit the invisible dog that doesn't exist.
Right. There's first it was a dog, then it was they were driving too close to a car, and then it was one of them was changing the radio. Now, I don't believe that they hit the gay bar on purpose. I believe that they are just fucking idiots, and they happen to hit a gay bar, because that stretch of Broadway, I used to live in that general area, and there's a lot of empty buildings down there.
I was going to say, the footage made it look like, I was like, no, I just mean from the perspective of someone who spent a little time in both cities, and in the case of one, I saw it mostly from a train, and from the other, I was driving in and around it. But it made that footage of that street was like, I didn't realize that St. Louis was like neck and neck with Baltimore for most abandoned buildings on a street.
Bro, that's not even the worst part. That's South City. Like, South City is the nicer area. North City is where it, like, honestly, it looks like I don't say this like to be hyperbolic. It looks like a fucking war zone. Like, it's the buildings half burned down, and just derelict cars all over the place. Like, it reminds me of like being in a slightly greener, like Iraq, in some of the more heavy combat areas. And it is not a very safe area. And so, but that area, all that happened in, yeah, it is not. There's not a lot of business down there. And again, it is trying to be up and coming, but it's and that neighborhood, like, that's where I live, so there's a lot of like really old Victorian era houses down there. There's a lot of really great architecture down there, but it is just not really well served by the rest of the city. So it is unfortunate, but yes, it's a very a blighted area. Sadly there were some really nice buildings. Like, we used to have a lot of buildings that had, like, names and facades built into the side of the building, and these beautiful like brick and cornice work and all this great stuff. And it goes by the wayside, and it doesn't get kept up on, and then it collapses, and then we tear it down to the ground, and we say, yeah, we'll build something there eventually, and then we never do, and it's just a big hole in the ground. And that's St. Louis. That's why we've been hemorrhaging population since for the last 50 years.
Yeah, man. Well, it's one of those things where I don't want to like cast aspersions because I don't know the city very well, but I can't.
I'll
deny.
Cast them. Don't worry.
I'll say you're the native St. Louis, and you can fucking say whatever you want. But y'all don't want a guy from across two states from Indiana being like, "Damn, St. Louis is like shit."
Yeah, well, I feel like Midwesterners know, though. Like, every Midwesterner is just like, I'm proud of my city, but there's parts of it that, like, I understand are falling apart.
Yeah, or I'm proud of my city in the sense that I left it, in my case, because Indianapolis just sucks. It's just boring.
Yeah, it's like being in the Army. Like, you hate being in the Army, but after you're out of the Army, you're like, man, wasn't it great being in the Army, doing those cool stuff, and, like, not remembering all those shitty parts?
I gotta be real with you, dude. I never feel that way. I just don't. By the time I left, I was so ready to get out. So we got to close out because I know we're running up on time, but really quickly, I was gonna say, quick question from our list of Ask a Dad. Now it's 2 dads, so ask the dads. What's the best lawnmower brands you'd recommend?
Ooh.
I would say Honda. The reason being for small ones. In the olden days, I would say, because I used to mow pastures for people when I was a teenager, and they typically had the John Deere riding lawnmowers or like full-on tractors. But I've heard a lot of bad things about the like defeat wear shit in John Deere motors now, where like they charge you an arm and a leg and you can't get any repairs done except through John Deere authorized representatives. So I'd say honestly, if you're going for a house and not for a farm or for fields or whatever, Hondas always seem to work pretty well for me.
So personally, I have a very small house, and I have a small yard. And my old house, I had a slightly larger yard, but still not. It's a city house, so it doesn't have a whole lot of acreage attached to it. And we have used a battery-operated Cobalt lawnmower for the last 5 years or so. Cobalt is the Lowe's brand. I know. I think Home Depot is the Riboy something. I don't know how to pronounce it. There's a Y and an I in it for some reason. But I've loved it. I got a lawnmower and a Cobalt weed eater, so the battery can swap back and forth, and I can just charge the thing. The great thing about an electric lawnmower is the same great thing about an electric car is that there's not an engine. So there's not a lot of oil and moving parts that you have to deal with. Like the biggest thing is once in spring, I will take the blade off of the bottom of it. I'll put it into a clamp and I'll sharpen it, and then I'll put it back on. And that's really it. That's the only winterizing I have to do. So I've had good experience with the Cobalt brand, but really I would say any battery operated, if you have a small enough yard and if you keep up on it, because like if you let your grass get too long, the battery is going to wear down really fast. So
the plug-in DC ones tend to have a lot of torque, but like there's limits to it. I will say that's one thing I have noticed with stuff that's got DC motors, like electric battery or plug-in electric, is that like you can actually sometimes, depending on how strong they are, they can do quite well. But yeah, at the end of the day, you don't want to be taking a thing that's got a limited battery life, and it's like trying to do an industrial level cleaning of an office building with one of those battery powered Dyson vacuums. The first 3 minutes will be great, but you're kind of fucked after.
We have one of those. Those things are great too. I highly recommend getting those battery. It's a wall mounted detachable one. It takes care
Dyson
of
guy is
my
a piece
little
of
tiny
shit,
house.
but like it's those vacuums are quite good. I had one in my apartment in New York, and one battery charge, because our apartment was so small, was enough to do like a full vacuuming of everything. So
yeah, especially I got 3 cats and a fucking dog, so I'm constantly having to vacuum.
Well, anyway, Francis, it's wonderful speaking with you again. I know that we always stray off topic because we're just having a dad chat, but I just want to say it's great to be back. And for all of you out there listening, if you like what we do, you can subscribe to our Patreon and get all of our bonus content for $5 a month. That goes all the way back to the beginning of 2017. Also, at higher tiers, Francis will email you swag, pins, etc. And we have a YouTube channel where we put copies of the show up on YouTube, so you can support it there. You can share it. If you want to leave reviews, that's also really helpful on things like Apple Podcasts, so on and so forth. We would greatly appreciate it. But also, we just word of mouth helps too if you like it. And thank you for listening. And Francis, you know what? I hope it warms up, or at least enough that you're not in the 32-degree pod shack for much longer. And
we're up to 45.
45, man. You know what? It's the little things that keep you going.
Nate, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yep. See you later.
Zoom.